views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, how's everybody today or tonight? We really have a great show for you. We have two wonderful guests. This, of course, is the Bronx Buzz, where we do reporters round tables to talk about journalists in the Bronx, find out what they're writing about, what they're thinking about, what's behind some of the things they've written about, and you get to know who they are so that when you read what they write, and maybe in some cases what they do on television or what they do with their cameras, you can know a little bit more about it and stay as informed as possible. Today, two great guests. Abigail Savitz-Lew from City Limits will be joining us, and she has this excellent study of the zonings and rezonings in the Bronx that I know a lot of people are concerned about and are interested in, so we're going to do that. And then in our second segment, it's not going to be a round table, it's going to be a rectangular table today. We will have Marlene Peralta, who is an expert in immigration, and of course we're going to talk a lot about the executive order from the president and all those kinds of things. But first, Abby Savitz-Lew from City Limits, so nice to have you with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
I congratulated you when I saw you today and said I thought your work on the rezonings in the city was thorough and complete and as good a study of this stuff as I've seen and read. So thank you for your great work.
Thank you so much.
She's so humble, isn't it nice? But really, let's just get into why the whole idea of rezoning is worth covering to the depth that you did. So let's just talk about rezonings in general, and then of course we'll focus on the Bronx.
Definitely. Well, I feel like most people in the city today, one of their main concerns is the affordability crisis, and they're suffering. They can't pay their rent, or people say that they are being displaced from their home. Homelessness, right, at an all-time high. So I think that rezonings have become one of the major issues to cover in the city because the mayor has said that one of his strategies to tackle the affordability crisis will be to boost housing growth and both market rate and rent restricted, or you might say affordable housing in various neighborhoods, in roughly a dozen neighborhoods. And so, that's not the only strategy that the mayor wants to use to address it, but it is one of the more controversial ones. Yeah.
I want to go back, and you really, and I spent a lot of time with this piece, and I've been going back and reading it again. You studied a little bit of the history of it, and so people, I guess we have short memories, and we say, well, okay, this is what de Blasio was doing. But you went back and also compared it to what Michael Bloomberg had done.
Right.
Talk about what you found in that work, Bloomberg's rezoning versus de Blasio's rezoning. Many people say it's the same. Of course, the de Blasio administration said, nah, we're doing it totally different.
Exactly, yeah. So, we hear residents and advocates in different neighborhoods all the time saying, look at what happened in Williamsburg, in Long Island City, in Park Slope. Bloomberg did these rezonings. The administration changed the allowable density and what you're allowed to build there, and now there are skyscrapers, and there's so much displacement. And if you do look at there's been very few studies done, but there is some research done that does suggest in areas that were upzoned that there was a significant demographic change, both in comparison to the city as a whole. Now, some people say, well, there was also significant demographic change in certain neighborhoods that were not rezoned, like Bushwick, although Bushwick was near Williamsburg, so it's hard to tell. But anyway, so there's a lot of people who are concerned that the de Blasio administration is just going to repeat what the Bloomberg administration did, rezone places and increase allowable density and cause displacement.
One of the main points that you brought up, and I suppose maybe my own fault, I had never really focused on it, and that is which neighborhoods get selected to be rezoned. And you really debated and made it clear that in many cases it's communities of color. I hadn't viewed it that way. I had always viewed it, well, they have a neighborhood that needs a little help. But there really is that suspicion of an ethnic component in it, that if we're going to do it, let's do it in there, and either they don't have the power to complain, and or have the representation to fight the kind of gentrification that may have happened in Long Island City, for example. Is there some truth to it? And then looking, of course, at the Bronx with the Jerome Avenue study and the potential for, some people don't know, they're studying Southern Boulevard in the same way. Yeah. Is this a result of the same philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, so if we look at, first I'll talk about the statistics, and then I'll talk about what the de Blasio administration says. The statistics show us that yes, the de Blasio administration, it has chosen communities that are more Black and Latino and poorer than the city as a whole. The plans that the Department of City Planning has chosen are 85% Black and Latino. The administration says, well, but we don't believe this is going to cause displacement in these communities. What we're doing is bringing revitalization to these communities and lots of affordable housing and other investments.
Well, and so let me interject on that. Yes, you could look at the numbers, and yes, it's true. But if you're, and I'll always use the Bronx, you're not going to go to rezone, let's say, Riverdale, because it doesn't seem to need that kind of boost to, you know what I mean, to improve it. I mean, there are stores, and there, the same thing with, let's say, Pelham Parkway. You're not necessarily going to do that. Because if you look at Jerome Avenue, there are people who are struggling. They need better housing. We need to infuse more opportunity for those people. Am I wrong, or and am I coming across as really kind of racist when I say that?
But it's such what you're making me think about is right now, when there is a kind of an upzoning plan, or I'll say a rezoning with increases in density in a particular area, the administration says, okay, we'll do this in this poor neighborhood, and we'll also give you all these other resources. We'll, improve.
Right.
Do those things have to be together? I think is an interesting question, because maybe some people say we should increase density, we should rezone wealthy communities. Now, those communities might not need the investments in commercial revitalization, in improved streetscaping that the poorer communities do. So it makes me want to sort of investigate, do those things need to be paired together, the revitalization?
Gee, I'm so happy that I asked questions that neither of us can answer. and both of us, I could see it in your face and in my face now. I'm like, it's a really interesting question of, for example, why not rezone certain areas and put new types of housing? But people there would say, well, kind of like we're doing okay, we don't have that problem. So I don't want to belabor that point. Something that you wrote here, and I just thought it was like crystalline clear. To some activists, the city's choice to encourage a mix of market rate and rent restricted construction rather than focus on subsidizing housing for the lowest incomes is one that comes with grave risks. And the risk, of course, then is displacement.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you, in my own study and talking to people in all the communities, the biggest issue is they're always worried, and we're always worried, that people at the lowest end will be pushed out. Mm-hmm. And so what you wrote here is saying, you know what, if we focus on those people and help them really, maybe we can still do the kind of upzoning that we want. I didn't ask a question, I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that there are advocates, I won't say my personal opinion, but I think that there are advocates who really believe that that rather than creating an overall boost in the housing supply, both market rate and affordable, that we need to focus on creating very low income housing and on creating more public land and in different nonprofit-owned, community-owned land structures on which very low-income housing can be built. But the administration is taking a different approach.
Do you believe that the processes the city has been using, and my sense was from even talking to people in the Department of City Planning, that they learned something of what they did at Jerome Avenue. There was so much objection, there was so much anger, and there still is very big, grave concern about what happened there and how it went down, that with Southern Boulevard, they seem to be a little bit more inclusive, bringing in community groups to have a little more input at the front end. Is there an issue in your mind with the way the city does its processes?
Mm-hmm. I can't really say yet whether I think that the city is taking a different approach in Southern Boulevard. But what I can say is that that the Southern Boulevard study, that the rezoning study that the Department of City Planning has just started, it builds off of a lot of community visioning that has been going on in that area. There's been the group that's worked very hard to try to get the Sheridan Expressway turned into a boulevard. So there's a lot of excitement.
So that dialogue had existed beforehand,
right.
Whereas Jerome Avenue, it was like, this neighborhood we're going to go to, and they were like, whoa, 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 who are you talking to?
I think there's a little bit of that sentiment, yeah.
Another aspect which you covered, and there are a couple of different, and before you go, we're going to talk about where you can find this great, great work. There's another aspect which I have been involved with, even in personal advocacy in the Bronx and through learning about these, is the whole notion of the environmental impact statements. Yeah. And so the people at the Jerome Avenue study are saying, you're not touching anything, and I personally believe it's correct, unless we get a full environmental study, impact statement of what this is going to entail and what the implications are. I'm going to just say this. I think the process, the ULURP process, is an absolute mess because they put things into these studies that don't mean anything. It doesn't matter if it's true or not true because then they don't follow it in the long run. What's your sense about the DEIS? I guess we're still waiting to see that for the Jerome Avenue study?
That's right. It's probably sometime in the spring. I've heard it's been postponed a bit, so I'm not sure when. But yeah, basically, this environmental impact statement that the city has to produce for each of these rezonings, they created this whole process to create the environmental impact statement in the 90s. And now some people say, well, in the 90s was a very different climate. No one was talking about displacement because of rising rents. Maybe we need to revise the formulas and the sort of methods by which we do assess the impacts of a potential rezoning. So there are some people who are saying we need to revisit the way it's
many people identify me with the advocacy against building the Croton water filtration plant in the Northwest Bronx, and as much as I don't like to be stigmatized around it, I was very vocal about it, and so we all know that that's what Gary was really concerned about. But the environmental impact statement that they put out at that time, frankly, was completely fraudulent. I mean, it just was baloney. And the stuff they said they were going to do, they really never followed, or they worked around anyway. So, and what you say, I believe, is very true, that the whole ULURP process really needs to be looked at. And if it's put down in writing in an environmental impact statement, this is my advocacy. I believe that that it should be followed. Before we let you go, how do people find this work? I know there are people in the Bronx that are really interested in the whole rezoning concept. How do we find it? A little background about city limits and what we're going to do with it.
Definitely. So Zone In is a site at it's a site within citylimits.org.
Zone In?
Yeah, Zone In. It's where
so
we have
citylimits.org
/series/Zone In, but it's soon going to be zonein.org, I promise.
Okay. Oh, so you'll have your own site to talk specifically about these things.
Yeah, and if you go to citylimits.org and you click on the Zone In button, or you type in /series/Zone In, you can see a map of the roughly dozen neighborhoods where there is rezoning proposals being discussed, and you can read articles for your neighborhood. And we also recognize that a lot of the people in these neighborhoods might not have computer access, and some of them are, many of them are Spanish speakers. So we're right now working on
listen, the other thing, we got to run because I do want to bring Marlene Peralta on the show. I also want to tell our viewers, go to City Limits, look for Abigail Savage Lou, look for all the great work she did, read the stuff about the zoning, because you're going to really get really good grassroots reporting about your neighborhood that we really don't get enough of. So Abby Savage Lou from City Limits, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We're going to have your boss here next week, Jared Murphy, the editor of City Limits, will be here next week. But it's always great to have you. We appreciate it. Thank you
so much.
All right, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the biggest issues in the country. Don't go away.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family?
This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything.
Oh, sorry. Go along, son!
it's always worth it.
Whoa!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
Okie dokie, back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and I'm thrilled that Marlene Peralta is back with us from Progressive Cities. Nice to have you with us, Marlene.
Thank you.
There is so much going on, and I suppose many of us born and bred Americans are saying, wait a minute, we have always, first of all, we all came from, our ancestors came from somewhere else, and we have always embraced the idea of bringing people in. Obviously, the Trump executive order to limit immigration, and we know all the different nuances of it, has really struck a lot of people and hit them very hard. For you, do you get the sense, because the Trump administration has defended this, that this is, they say it is absolutely not a target against Muslims, do you have a sense that this is in fact a look at people of that ethnicity who are Muslim background and saying we don't want you here?
Well, yes. I mean, the discussion has always been how the religion is tied to terrorism, and that's the narrative that's being carried around. His argument is it's only 7 countries. There's over 40, Muslim countries in the world, but yet, it was undiscriminated. I mean, he was banning people who did have visas, who did have green cards, who are already in the United States system, who you could go and find. So this argument that he's given, it's a little troubling because he is definitely targeting people because of their faith. And we got to think in the perspective of the humanization of this problem. These are people running away from violence. So yes, they're running away from terrorism. That's a fact. So how do we protect them as Americans? And yes, it's valid that we also have to take into account terrorism because this country has been hit hard by terrorism, and we have to find ways. This country, yes. We have to try to prevent.
I'm holding all my responses to you.
Yes, we have to prevent, but we have to find a balance. I mean, it's keeping innocent people away and leaving them in the hands of terrorists, the actual way to solve the problem, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, to me, the first response to what you just said is, wait a minute, how big an attack problem do we have here at the United States? We haven't been attacked in that way since 9/11 from any of those 7 countries. Of course, there are allegations that he wouldn't touch the countries that he himself had business with.
Yes.
I mean, that will play itself out over time. But I just think the justification for doing this is basically what they did was ramp up fear. And not only did they ramp it up, but they said, we have to do it today because we're worried that somebody could have, try to beat the clock with it when we haven't had these problems. In addition, President Obama put in place many of these things, and we'll get into that. It'll be my next question about, the blame to President Obama. But Obama put safeguards in place already so that these people were vetted properly and were generally not getting here.
And that's a good point. I mean, the 7 countries that he's targeting, it was a list of 7 countries that Obama had on, on his watch. He didn't ban people from those 7 countries, but it was more like a warning type of list that he had, and it was based on actual threat of 2 Iraqis, right, that were on the terrorist list. So he, the consequence of that was making this vetting process even harder for people to get here. I mean, it takes a refugee even 3 to 4 years to get here. I mean, they can get killed in the meantime, but still that's the process that the United States offer, right? So this new president went beyond that and said, oh, forget about any vetting system. We just got to stop them from coming altogether.
What do you make of a statement I saw very recently that, I don't remember if it was Sean Spicer or Kellyanne Conway, it could have been either, that this was basically President Obama's plan, and we just did the same thing, but because the media hates us, that's why all of a sudden you have protests.
Well, again, Obama did not ban these 7 countries, right? Let's start from there. And, it was, the problem was during the Obama administration, he had actual threat with these 2 Iraqi individuals that were on the terrorist list, and they came here as refugees. So that kind of set up the alarms for everybody and say, well, wait a minute, we have to vet everybody, thoroughly to make sure that we're not admitting any terrorists here. But he did not, the process for visas was taking a lot longer because of those issues, but he was not deterring anyone from coming. And he was not targeting people with visas or green cards. And this plan that Trump put in place, it doesn't discriminate.
And also, I have to say, the process, it's very obvious that certainly Obama had a very strong network of agencies and other people involved in really everything that he did. In this case, it's been made clear that many different agencies, Homeland Security and others, were not even aware that this was coming. I mean, it came out at 4:45 on a Friday afternoon.
And that's what created the chaos in the first place, because then people started getting stranded at airports because our authorities had no clue what to do. They were just detaining people because there was no formal instructions on what they were supposed to do.
Where do you think this comes from? In other words, what is the Trump administration really trying to do? Do they believe that they're going to make America safer this way? And let me just add, I'll let you answer in a second, because of course there's many suggestions that we will not be safer because we're cutting off our communication with potentially people who have been helping us all along. Go ahead.
I mean, he's trying to create chaos. We all agree on that, and he has
you think
succeeded.
He's trying to create chaos?
Yes, he's trying to create chaos. He's trying to send a huge message internationally even, but he's not. He's just trying to answer his campaign messaging, that what he promised to the extreme, right, that it's possible to stop immigration, to ensure that this country is safe, and that's what he's doing. But he's not really looking at what the real impact of those measures should be. There's been talks around, now you're trying to put these people in the hands of terrorists, and maybe they're trained them, and now then we have real terrorists coming here after us because you're closing their doors. You're using a religion, as your base for all of this, and you're setting just the fire even worse.
What do you think, for people who think like you do and are very concerned about this, and we're certainly hearing about it from all sides of the country, all corners of the country, what do you think the play out ultimately is? I mean, people say he should be impeached. Where do you, and there are protests everywhere, where do you think all of this is going? Certainly the president appears to be intractable in the things that he says and does, and he's probably not going to do anything unless he's forced to do it. How does that happen? What is the next play out to make a change?
I mean, Congress is the one that has, the upper hand here. I mean, Congress is the one that has to put a stop on him. I don't know how they're going to do that because he is showing that he is not answering to anybody.
The question is if Republicans who hold the majority start to get frustrated or start to disagree,
yes,
or believe that their own positions are in jeopardy because of protests in their communities,
yes,
et cetera, then
yes,
maybe you'll get a different
But I
action.
think it's going to have to take Trump to, get into a big mess before Congress decides, well, this needs to stop. And so far, I feel like Congress is just waiting to see what happens. And in Congress, I mean, Republicans, since they're the majority. Because Democrats are now threatening on filibustering his nominations and all of that.
We'll see how far that goes.
But how far that goes, I don't know.
Before we run out of time, I want to give you a chance to talk about your own program. You do Prospecto Latino. That's on the Manhattan
Manhattan Neighborhood Network, yes.
Tell me about Prospecto Latino.
Yes, well, it's a monthly show for now, and it's a Spanish language public affairs, and we try to discuss the same topics we're discussing right now, but with...
In Spanish, of course.
Yes, but with very basic information for those people who maybe don't understand the political process in the United States, and we want to engage them to know how their lives are affected by politics every day. Mm-hmm. Like people say, I don't like politics, I don't even vote, I don't care. But we have to care no matter what. We have no choice.
Well, I think we've now connected the two
yes,
parts of our discussion, because if all those people who've been protesting came out to vote, maybe Trump wouldn't have been the president. We don't know that at this point.
We don't know.
Marlene Peralta, thank you so much for joining us. We also want to thank Abby Savage-Lew, who was in our first segment. We hope you come back. There's always a lot to talk about.
Sure.
You're a great guest. And we will be back here next Thursday night for the Bronx Buzz. And also, I will tell you that next Monday night on Bronx Talk, our other program, we're going to be talking about Mott Haven and the historic district and development and how all that intertwines. So a lot going on. We'd love to see more of you here on BronxNet Television.